You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Eric. Oh, wow. Eric's not here. Wow. Damn. Alongside Zach Chavalella and Morgan Burkett. Eric has his day off today. Catching up on Flyer stuff. But we do welcome back Morgan as we activated him off IR.
Yeah, man, I feel like it threw you off there. What happened?
It completely threw me off. It was
Is
like
this what it's been
routine.
like since I've been gone? It's just trending downwards, man. It's just chaos.
It depends on who you ask. If you ask the chat,
it's funny. He keeps introducing Eric as Morgan, and then now the one time that Eric's not here,
Oh yeah,
he finally gets it right.
we're different people, Brian. It's messed up, but listen,
we're never go over that. It's the bodega stuff all over again. Oh man, but how you guys feeling, man? What's going on?
Feeling good, man. It feels good to be back. Nice not to be inside every single locker room and be able to analyze football from outside. Looking forward to it not being my livelihood on the line when I talk shit about a team. It'll be nice.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to ignoring my livelihood during this during this podcast. As I told you guys before the pod, not a fun Sixers day, so ready to talk some birds.
If it makes you feel better, the Mets are not going to the World Series.
It makes me feel significantly better when
Okay.
I tell you that there are a few teams whose downfall nightly I pray for. The New York Mets are very near the top of that list.
But if it doesn't make you feel better, the Mets beat the Phillies to get to the NLCS.
Doesn't matter. Didn't go anywhere. What'd you win? Nothing.
But you know who did win over the weekend? The Philadelphia Eagles, and they won by a very large margin, 28-3. It was the Saquon game, as we all called it to be, scripted perfectly as we expected it to be. He rushed for 176 yards, had one touchdown, was vultured by the tush push on two goal line stands. But overall, like me personally, I've been giving Nick Sirianni the business for the longest, and don't make that face, okay? I've been giving him a lot of flack, all right? I've been giving him a lot of crap.
But if you don't want me to make the face,
I've been giving him a lot of crap, right? You know, I was really hard on him for the last several months. And I don't know about you guys, but I was impressed with the fact that this team stood on business on Sunday, and they did something that they haven't done in a year and a half, and that's actually win by a large margin against a team that they are expected to beat. It was impressive nonetheless to me. I mean, the offense, I don't mind Jalen Hurts not throwing more than 15 or 20 times in a game. I don't mind him not going long ball all the time. I don't know. I was impressed, to say the least. How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can't be stressed enough how difficult just winning games in the NFL can be. And, you know, you've seen the Giants give the Eagles trouble, especially when they were the better team going in. And so you can't overlook the fact that, you know, it's a solid win. And like you said, it's a significant win for the first time in a while. I think as we kind of dive into it and talk more about it, there's still some question marks. There's some things that even though they won, for better or for worse, there's plays left on the table. So, you know, good in some regards if they're able to capitalize on those, bad if others if they can't figure it out, right? So, you know, it's a win. And I think like you said, Brian, like they got the run game going, the defense looked better. For me, it was just one of those games where they kind of got out of their own way, which is good to see because that's what it's felt like over the last couple of weeks. They just kept getting in their own way. So to have that game, okay, listen, like we can still leave plays on the table. And as long as we get out of our own way, we can come away with a win and beat the teams we're supposed to. So overall, more positives than negatives for sure.
Yeah, I think Morgan, you kind of summed it up perfectly there, especially offensively, right? You know, that's where a lot of that meat's been left on the table, like you've been saying. And what is, I would say, even more encouraging than what we saw on the field yesterday was how Nick Sirianni followed it up today when he acknowledged that this, or maybe even acknowledge is the wrong word, but he accepted the term that this is a running team now, right? So the idea that this is not just a one game experiment. You know, we talked a lot last week about how they should make this the Saquon Barkley game, and part of our reason was, you know, good for Saquon, but most of it was really, you have one of the best running backs this year, the best running back in the league. Use him and use him right. You know, not just about getting him touches, but getting him the right touches, making it so you have the right feel and rhythm to the game. And the Eagles checked those boxes throughout this game. Now, still, first quarter, I don't know what's going on with the script, man, but this is still feeling uneven. And that's an area that Philadelphia still needs to figure out. But they did make that commitment to Saquon, that commitment to the run. Again, not just Saquon, but you saw Kenneth Gainwell get his as well. That's what they need to do going forward. So to hear Sirianni accept that today, the day after, that means almost more to me than what I saw on the field yesterday, because it shows that this is not just, you know, an aberration. This is not just a one-off. This is something that we could be looking at for the Eagles in the weeks moving forward.
And it's funny you mentioned that, right? Like, so in 2017, the turnaround game for the season was actually at the Link against the New York Giants, where Carson hit Alshon Jeffrey for that long pass, went out of bounds, and Jake Elliott hit that long field goal, and they won it, right? That was a turning point of their season where it was like, okay, the Eagles are for real. And it feels like that's what this is, right? That in that game, they found the run game. We saw LeGarrette Blount go off against the Giants. This week, we saw Saquon Barkley go off. We saw Kenny Gainwell go for 56 yards. It just felt like they finally got their head out of their asses and was like, hey, like, let's try something different. Let's keep it simple, which I'm perfectly fine with, because Jalen, as much as we've rode Sirianni's issues, right, with the offense and the lack of creativity, I know that this offense is predicated and surrounded by the talents and strengths of Jalen Hurts, right? Like, it's built around him. That's what you want. But at the same time, like, this is what, his third coordinator in the last like couple years. I mean, we can't expect much out of it. He's still getting used to Kellen Moore and the wrinkles that Kellen Moore brings. But with this, the pistol formation, which we didn't see at all last year, we saw him go under center. We saw him actually be a game manager, and I don't mind him doing that right now as he redevelops his game and gets comfortable with Kellen Moore. How did you guys feel about his play?
Yeah, I think it's a good point you bring up, where I was thinking about it earlier myself, and just I think that Jalen's been kind of lauded on the fact that he's been able to pick up offenses quick, and you know, with so many different coordinators. I don't know. You mentioned like the NFL, like even into college, I think it's like 6 in a row now. It's crazy, 5 or 6, but. You know, that's been one of his strengths, and I just feel like at this point of your career, when you're trying to get used to the speed of NFL, still it seems like it's just going to hinder you. And so I feel like some of those things are coming to pass, and whether it's, you know, a hindrance of Jalen's development, or it's, you know, a mix of the OC and quarterback not quite clicking yet. I think it's probably both. Like, even though you have those times where it just seems like, you know, it's not really clicking the way they want it to. There's other times where there's just open receivers and Jalen's not seeing them. Like, there's too many times where he's just not able to diagnose the defense well. And, you know, to sum that up, you put it in a different position, for example, like Jalen's eyes are just bad, right? You compare that to like a safety, for example. You know, you have safety with bad eyes. Well, now all of a sudden he's a box safety, right? And you play him different, and his position almost changes, right? And so I think that in a way, the dedication to the run game for a team is good. I don't know, like, that Jalen Hurts benefits from it as a quarterback. And so, like, I think that he needs to be out there and learn this offense. And by, you know, dialing in on the run game, you probably win more games. But then come playoff time, if Jalen Hurts doesn't get the opportunities to learn this stuff and learn the offense, it could cause problems. And so it's I think it's a blessing and a curse that you have the crush that is Saquon Barkley, because there's still so much that has to be unlocked in this offense, and so many, again, plays left on the field, even in a decisive win like that. Yeah, and exactly, like there's the one where Devontae Smith was free on the crosser. Smitty in general was not very involved, and this is why I'm not ready to crown like the turnaround game yet, because you still don't have Dallas Goedert healthy, which is going to be huge. Devontae Smith wasn't used that much, and even still, like it felt like this game was kind of balanced on those big plays. And that's something that Sirianni talked about earlier. It's just not sustainable. You can't depend on that, even though it feels like there's teams in the NFL that, are able to just get big plays. And, teams like the Chiefs, part of that is that they're able to get those 5-6 yards per play. And the run game helps with that. But I still feel like there's a lot of questions to be answered.
Yeah, it's hard not to disagree, or it's hard to disagree, I should say. Devontae Smith is we've talked a lot over the years about how happy is this wide receiver room going to be, with the targets going around and everything like that. Devontae Smith, I think, is fine after Sunday. If that becomes the norm, I don't think any NFL player would be happy that anyone near his caliber, right? So you're going to have to figure out how to incorporate Devontae Smith into it. You're going to have to figure out how to incorporate Dallas Goedert into it. I mean, you don't have to worry about Paris Campbell anymore, but there's still plenty of guys who you're going to have to worry about getting touches for the rest of the season, right? So how do you maintain that balance, right? How do you find that? And I think that, just for me personally, like what I've seen, what I would want this team to do is establish that run from the beginning, right? You work that in early. It doesn't have to become the story of your offense, but you need to set the tone that way. And then from there, that unlocks so much more in the receiving game that you're able to play off of that running game, whether you're talking about play action or, even just keeping the defense honest, keeping the box a little bit more heavily loaded on the defensive side. So if you're Philadelphia, that is the main goal, is to be able to free up that entire offense to use all of those weapons, because you're not just paying Saquon. You're paying A.J. Brown. You're paying Dallas Goedert. You're paying Devontae Smith. And it's not about the money that you're giving them. It's about the investment that you put into these guys and what they are expected to deliver on that investment. And you have to give them the opportunity to do so. This isn't a player who is not of the caliber to actually live up to their contract. These are all players who can live up to those contracts. It's about actually enabling them to be able to do so in the best interest of your team to win.
And to kind of get Jalen going, like, should they establish? I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I do think they need to establish a run early on and kind of get things flowing for the offense that way. But for Jalen's sake, should they incorporate in more quick passes than they are with the vertical stuff? Like, it seems like the vertical stuff has just been imprinted into this system, and it could be a Jalen thing, it could be a Nick thing, right? But do they need to incorporate more slants or more, comeback routes for AJ Brown or for Devontae? Like, that seems to be the bread and butter for AJ, but we're not seeing much in the bread and butter section for Devontae, who again came across the middle, was wide open. We don't know how where that goes, and that's a play that they ran with Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith multiple times this season. But do they need to, in order to help Jalen, should they incorporate quick passes within the offense early on and honestly consistently enough?
I think the simple answer is yes, but I think you will see it happening a little bit more for two reasons. Is one, I do think Jalen's got to read it a little bit better. You saw them try and get Saquon involved in the quick passing game a little more, and they kind of went away from that recently. So I could see that coming back pretty easily. You already have those plays installed. You just got to go back to it, work it into the script. But I think the other thing too, you talked about just different launch points and different ways and reads that Jalen's asked to do this year. He's under center, he's in pistol more, he's moving around a lot more, and that's just going to kind of affect with your ability to read, especially with those short passes. So I could see them adding more. I don't think it's going to be a matter of if, it's going to be a matter of when, but I do think that it just takes time, right? You're under center all of a sudden. Now you're going, man, I do not know what my camera's doing, but right, you're understanding, you're doing a lot more play action, you're moving around, your eyes are changing, so those quick reads are a little bit tougher in those situations. So I think Jones got to get used to it, but again, quick passes, easy install. I could see them doing a lot more of it.
Yeah, and as far as utilizing Saquon in the passing game at all, we saw the early success in week one. It wasn't just a matter of quick passes, but it seemed like Jalen just isn't used to reading Saquon, like when he's going through his progressions. Obviously, there was that wide open, could have been an additional touchdown to Saquon Barkley in this game that he completely missed the read, didn't even look Saquon's way, missed the throw. And it's fine. Like obviously, like they won in a shellacking, so you don't want to overly criticize, but these are things that you have to talk about because that situation could come up in a game where you don't have the luxury of being up 20 plus points in the game, right? So for Jalen, I would love to see them establish a little bit more of that kind of short game rhythm. And whether you're talking about just sending Saquon out in the flat and really focusing on that in practice and kind of hammering that point home to him, whether you're talking about running either Devonta or AJ on a slant or an in route from the slot. I mean, I'm fine with either of those as well. I think that you need to figure out a way just to get the ball in the hands of the playmakers, right? So obviously, we've seen the big playability. We've seen the deep ball to AJ. These are all things that can happen. We've seen big plays to Dallas Goedert when healthy, right? But what we need to see is a little bit more of that. And it's not even just an in-between game, but we need to see a little bit more of the rack attack, right? So we need to see the opportunity for a guy like Saquon to make moves in the open field, the opportunity for a guy like Devontae Smith, who, he doesn't necessarily have that long speed of some of the most elite top receivers, but he has very impressive speed and he has good agility as well. So I think he's a guy that you could definitely look at in the open field, making some guys miss. And more importantly than anything, just how he is as a route runner, that ability to create separation, I think is what you have to take advantage of for Devontae Smith. So I think a lot of that comes down to Kellen Moore, who, I won't exactly say what we saw this past Sunday was Kellen Moore's offense. We've talked a lot about, is this Kellen Moore's offense? This is Nick Sirianni's offense. I think it was the majority Kellen Moore's offense with added wrinkles of focusing on the running game. Like that's just something that doesn't always happen in a Kellen Moore offense. And there's more situational for this past game, right? So when you're talking about, what you need to see more from Kellen Moore, I'd like to see Smith particularly in motion throughout the game. I think that's one, utilizing him, not necessarily as like a Deebo Samuel role, because he doesn't have that kind of bulk that you can do some of the more running back type things that they do with Deebo in San Francisco, but utilizing him, in pre-snap movement, utilizing him over the middle of the field, crossing. And again, part of that's on Jalen Hurts to recognize that. We've talked, I feel like, unceasingly about it. Is it Jalen's aversion to throwing over the middle? Is it the team's aversion to calling plays over the middle? What exactly is it? Whatever it is, they need to figure out what it is, because they have to be able to connect over the field. But more importantly, I do think that there is still, and I've said this time and time again, opportunity to roll Jalen out, right, and be able to hit, whether it's Saquon Barkley in the flat, whether it's Dallas Goedert on an out route, if it's AJ or Devontae on a slant, just utilizing that right side of the field, because we've seen that be a plus to Jalen over the years. And when he's throwing on the run, we want to make sure that he's not, working with a clean situation, even if he's out of the pocket. But I think that this offensive line, even with the spare parts that we've seen kind of thrown in here and there, is still capable of playing at a level that can protect Jalen, even if he escapes out of the pocket. So I feel pretty confident in all the pieces that we've seen. It's just a matter of taking the next steps in order to open up the rest of the offense.
With Jalen, is it a confidence thing? He hesitates a lot when he goes to his first read, and it seems like he's holding on the ball, in my opinion, for way too long. I was looking at the Giants game; he held the ball for 3.6 seconds in the pocket. It's equivalent to how long he held the ball against, I believe it was the Falcons as well. But he's averaging 3 seconds time to throw in the pocket. Is this the thing where you can fix this in season, or is this? I don't want to say like the Carson Wentz stuff, right? Carson Wentz mechanically was just like all left up, right? He was stubborn. He didn't want to fix his mechanics. He was stuck in his ways. Jalen, we know there's a work ethic there. We know he's coachable. But what needs to be fixed to get Jalen to trust what he's seen and to trust his ability to get the ball into the right places?
I think number one, confidence comes from trust of your teammates, right? Like just knowing where they're going to be at, and trusting the protection. And it's not like it's been like the Eagles have been missing someone for every single game, but it's been a different cast almost every single week for Jalen, whether it's his offensive line or receiving core, and stuff like that. Like, it does matter, right? And it does kind of add up. You never know. For example, how differently Dallas Goedert runs that route than Calcaterra, right? Or it's really tough as a quarterback to lose your left tackle. That kind of that sixth sense in the back of your head now, it's harder to trust, right? And a lot of times it's just Jalen Hurts taking his eyes down, right, and kind of looking to escape the pocket, or a couple times where he just felt pressure where there was none, and stuff like that generally indicates just a little bit of lack of trust in the pocket. And so I think that comes with hopefully getting Jordan Mailata back after the 4 weeks. And hopefully he's able to come back full power and be good to go. But there is some of that. There's also just some of the fact that Jalen needs to watch a bit more film. It seems, and this is maybe me reading into things a little bit more, but with them starting slow, being bad in certain situations, third downs, etc., having trouble there, it just seems like this offense doesn't really know yet how defenses are going to try and stop it, right, and throw curveballs. And they've gotten something different every week. Obviously, had trouble with Todd Bowles' defense, who does a lot of different things and shows blitz in a lot of different ways. But, you're getting different kind of defenses throughout the week, and it just seems like this offense doesn't really know what to expect. That's why they get these slow starts, etc. And
is that a preparation thing from do you feel like this offense is not prepared to take on defenses that they're facing?
I think to some extent it's preparation. I think also when you look at Kellen Moore offenses like this, he just hasn't had these weapons, right? So how our defense is going to attack Jalen Hurts? It's going to be different than they attacked Dak Prescott. It's going to be different than they attacked Justin Herbert, right? So like you're going to see something different, and just the defenses they've been facing have been pretty creative. You talk about the Saints defense, has been really good. Over the last little while, and definitely has playmakers. The Bucs defense, same thing. And so it just feels like, one, preparation for sure, but two, just Kellen Moore figuring out, his weapons a little deeper, right? You didn't have that much time yet. It's still developing, trust the process. I think it'll happen, but definitely something to keep an eye on. I feel like they have to figure it out because something there's not clicking, and Jalen just got to trust his teammates a little bit more.
Yeah, just look at how the season is going to progress for Philadelphia. They're going to continue to see different defenses, obviously, but I think maybe not more importantly, but in addition to that, they're going to continue to see more potent offenses than they've seen for the past couple of weeks, right? I mean, the Browns and the Giants, we can agree, not exactly inspiring offenses. There was not a offensive touchdown scored by either team the past 2 weeks. That's a great representation of the Eagles' defense. It's also a great representation of how bad these offenses are, right? Going into this week, and we'll talk more about this on Saturday, but this game against the Bengals, you're going up against kind of a different animal, right? You're talking about a guy like Joe Burrow. You're talking about Jamar Chase. You're talking about T. Higgins, and even Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Like, these are playmakers, and these are guys who are going to be able to stress your defense more than we've seen these past two teams be able to do, right? And so you look at a team, Tampa Bay, when the Eagles played them at that time, were one of those teams that had those weapons that could stretch it. They have a couple interesting backs in Bucky Irving and Rashawn White, and then obviously their tandem of wide receivers and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That's more, I think, similar to what you're looking at in the Cincinnati matchup than you are against the Giants. But even beyond Cincinnati, that eventually you're going to meet up with Dallas, and I get that we love to joke on them how they've been this season. It's still Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. You have the Commanders coming up. We'll see if Jaden Daniels is back by then. He's been electric this year. And the Rams, if they have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp by then, assuming that none has been traded and they're both healthy, and then you have the Ravens after that, right? So I say all this just to say you're going to be facing a lot of these offenses coming up, these more powerhouse offenses. You're going to have to keep up with them, right? You're not just going to have to make sure that you're not going to be able to run the ball like you did against the Giants. You're not going to be able just to kind of pick on the little brother, as it were, like the Eagles did in this game. You're going to have to keep your offense competitive, keep it on the field, and keep producing with consistency And Morgan, I think you alluded to it earlier. That's something that, they didn't really see in this game, kind of relied a little bit more on the big play. And then, of course, the running game thereafter. So for Philadelphia, you have to figure out, how do I get, all these guys involved at the drop of a hat, basically? How do I get Jalen Hurts as comfortable behind the line of scrimmage, whether he's under center, whether he's running shotgun, whatever the case may be? I think he's going to be running majority shotgun for the rest of the season. That's just how Jalen Hurts likes to operate. But whatever the case is, you need to figure out, how do we, what are our core competencies in terms of, adjusting to certain factors in a defense. Like if you have a blitz heavy defense, all right, well, what are our quick outs? What are our quick plays that we can get out, to either a guy in flat, over the middle, whatever the case may be. If you have a situation where, you can ground and pound, be ready to adjust and do that. But you're going to need kind of not only just a fluidity to be able to make all of these changes throughout the year, but you're going to need basically to iron down, a package, as it were, for each of these scenarios, something that you can go to in each of these scenarios to make sure that you can have that long stemming success.
And it's funny because we saw this team put up 30 plus points against the Packers, right? We see them put 28 points against the Giants defense that was positively rated going into the game.
It was a good defense.
Yeah, but they lost key pieces, like Thibodeau was in there, and then Burns goes down.
Burns during the game.
But this team is capable of doing so. So, like, I'm curious to know what the hell's not clicking on their end that's just not showing on film. Like, it's a very weird thing, and it's just one of those things where it's I don't know. Maybe they're overthinking it. There's so much talent out there, and there's so many mouths to feed at this point. But one thing's for sure, it's just, the QB does have to operate at a high standard, not only because you're in Philadelphia, but because you're surrounded by talented individuals. Like, to me, they have the best offense on paper. They have the best offense in the league. You have a top running back. You have probably the best wide receiver in the league. You probably have a top 10 wide receiver as your wide receiver too. A top 5 tight end. You have a top 5 offensive line. Like, there's no reason why we should be seeing this team play down to their opponents, which I feel like was a theme over a couple seasons ago, where it was just disgusting how they count on doing this. But you should not be in a close game against the Browns that are just kicking field goals and one defensive touchdown. Like, it just makes zero sense, and something's got to click on their end. I'm tired of blaming Sirianni. I'm not gonna lie. Like, at some point, it's just, it's not the CEO head coach, right? Is it offensive coordinator not clicking with the quarterback? Is the quarterback coach not doing his part and getting Jalen prepared? Like, just something not clicking on their end that's driving me personally nuts.
I think there's a stiffness, or there has been throughout the season, a rigidity in philosophy. And part of that, I think, explains why we've continued to see that milked down blend of a Sirianni and a Moore offense in the beginning of the year. I think that I think it applies to more than just Nick Sirianni. I think there's a bit on Sirianni, a bit on Kellen Moore, a bit on Jalen Hurts, if being honest. But, what I would say is that what we saw this past week, again, what encouraged me more than anything is that the team showed a willingness to adapt. And that's something that you need throughout the course of the NFL season, because it's not static. It's ever changing. I mean, you look at all these teams, let's even just talk injuries for a second. The Eagles were not expecting to miss A.J. Brown for as long as they did, or Dallas Goedert for as long as they are. Other teams, you look at what's going on in Tampa Bay, they're going to have to adjust if they want to continue to be on track to make the postseason this year. The NFL, you have to adapt not only week to week, not only quarter to quarter, but snap to snap. You have to adjust ever changing in the environment that you're presented in. So Philadelphia showed the first signs of that, and to me, that bodes well. They need to continue to prove that they're willing to adapt. They can't just say, "Oh, well, we just put up 28, or beat the Giants by 25." Like, well, now we can just coast. Now we can do whatever we want. We can get back to normal. Like, none of that applies. You still have to continue to be willing to make those adjustments, continue to evolve, continue to adapt throughout the entire season if you're going to have any hope at making to your end goal, which is winning a Super Bowl.
Speaking of adapting, I think we could speak of a coordinator that has adapted, that Morgan is probably pretty ecstatic to talk about. Vic Fangio and his defense. I know it's the Browns. I know it's the Giants. But damn, like they're turning a they're turning a corner. I don't know if it's the corner just yet, but they're turning a corner. Quinion Mitchell is playing lights out. Darius Slay is underratedly and unappreciatedly playing lights out. Nakobe Dean came alive. Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, they're doing something. They did something on Sunday that I feel like was a little eye opening with with them working as a tandem to get Daniel Jones to run into one or the other. Like it just felt. Josh Sweat last season said that everybody was rushing on their own, like it wasn't together, right? But this Sunday it felt like it was actual a unit. Like we actually saw a team playing together on defense and making the key plays. How did you guys feel about the defense?
Yeah, I mean, definitely much better than we've seen to start the season. I think kind of a mix of both the X's and O's and the Jimmys and Joes. Like I think that to his credit, there have been big changes on the defense, right? And the biggest thing that I saw is just getting more creative with the blitz, right? This is something that Vic Fangio hasn't been known for and hasn't really done. And put his pride aside, and he's an old coach that has a lot of experience, and those coaches can sometimes be set in their ways. And again, showed development. I thought doesn't have to send the blitz all the time, but a couple of times he dialed it up, right? Really well thought out, timely, and you're sending different guys and you're giving different looks. I think on the flip side, you're still getting really good performances from guys like I think Nakobe Dean's performance has been underrated. Definitely made some mistakes, but like this defense looks a lot different if he's not flying around out there, making tackles. He's been pretty good in coverage for the most part. Again, I think we're kind of more realistic with who he is as a linebacker. And I think if we're realistic with who he is as a linebacker, he's been playing pretty well. And you take that kind of performance from him. Zach Bond's another guy. It's like, I don't know what the football gods were thinking when they drew up that storyline, man, but it's working out for the Eagles. I think that the underrated, maybe the unsung hero of this defense right now is Josh Sweat, though. I think he's been unbelievable. I think he's one of the most underrated defensive ends in the league right now. He's just been incredible. And again, he has his faults too. I just think, like you said, Brian, it's all these players who have, good and bad kind of coming together and playing as a unit. And when that happens, it doesn't really matter that you don't have, maybe the game wrecker, right, that you need on this defense. I think that collectively there's some really good talent on this defense, and that gets those guys like we hope for the future, these game wreckers like Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter already is, and even Jordan Davis, and the collective kind of group of these guys get going, because if they can and they keep playing like this, it's going to be really scary, because we really haven't seen the ceiling for a lot of the guys kind of in there. In the secondary, one thing I will say is, man, like Darius Slay kind of been in and out a couple times, and man, to have that depth at DB where you feel like you almost really don't miss a step is pretty incredible. The Eagles are going to be good for a while on defense.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the youth and how they performed, and I mean, the secondary, talking about guys like Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, Keely Ringo, Sidney Brown. We've kind of sung their praises for a while now. Reed Blankenship too. Don't want to leave him out. When you look at this defensive line, and really, I'll put it as this pass rush, so I can include Nakobe Dean into that, right? Their performance has been extremely impressive, this youth, right? And it's not necessarily the names that you would have thought. Everyone obviously would be looking for, a guy like Jordan Davis to take a major step forward. Jalen Carter obviously had 2 sacks this past week, but just with how often he's seeing double and triple attention, it's a little bit hard for him to really dominate as you would want to see. But then you look at some of these guys. Nolan Smith is starting to show signs of life. Nakobe Dean, as you mentioned, had a terrific game this past week, and I think as a pass rusher specifically has really shown something. I still have my concerns about him in coverage, but with what I've seen out of Zach Bond, which has exceeded my expectations of him in coverage, I feel a little bit better about that, especially with how the secondaries, performed as well. But when you're looking at the kind of guys, the ancillary guys, the outside guys. I know we love Milton Williams, but not everybody thinks about Milton Williams when they're talking about this team. Milton Williams has been fantastic. He was again this past Sunday. A guy who I talked about him last week, but you got to give it to him again. Moro Ojomo is I think just been fantastic for Philadelphia, and this is a guy here who we don't know what the future holds for Milton Williams. I think we would all ideally say that Philadelphia re-signs him. I believe he's up after this season, so we would want Philadelphia to re-sign him to a deal. Whether or not he does, Moro Ojomo is going to be potentially on this team to kind of ease that burden, right? So whether you bring in Milton Williams and you still need him as a depth piece, whether you're replacing Milton Williams because you need money to go elsewhere, whatever the case may be, Moro Ojomo looks like that guy who's going to be able to fill in at that spot a little bit. And even guys like surprise guys like a Thomas Booker, I think it's been a nice, pleasant surprise this year. And can you rely on him 100% of the time? No, but he's a guy who's contributing to the cause. And you just look at the general assortment of guys who has been contributing to Philadelphia this year. And I mean, how are you not pleasantly excited about where they are at this moment during the season? Right, obviously, a lot of struggles. Talk about the pass rush a lot. How are you gonna maintain these defenses if you're not getting to the quarterback, if you're not maintaining that pass rush? And I get it. It's the Giants. Andrew Thomas is out. That makes a world of difference for them. They're not a team like Philadelphia that can produce with their left tackle out. It's not the same place. However, to see this kind of production kind of build and build and build through the season is very encouraging. I would still love to add a pass rusher by the deadline. Mm-hmm. But as Morgan said, this bodes very well for the future. And it makes me feel more confident about the pass rush potential of this team over the next 2-3 years.
It feels like they're on the verge of something soon, right? And I want to set the expectation. I'm not saying this is going to be a top 3 defense in 2 or 3 weeks, but like everything's starting to click, right? You have Sidney Brown back now. You have Cooper DeJean, who Vic Fangio has realized is a very unique weapon. We saw guys like Jalix Hunt get a little playing time because the reserves came in. He got a strip sack. I mentioned last week, like Jonathan Gannon succeeded because he had the rotation. He kept guys fresh. I personally feel like a game like this should be convincing enough where Vic Fangio was like, you know what, I can actually rotate guys in and out. We saw Jordan Davis, and somehow, some way, this flew under the radar. He only played 12 snaps on Sunday, and it was mostly a pass rush, right? He's a run block kind of guy, but still, like this team, it's a lot deeper than a lot of people are giving them credit for. Like you mentioned Milton Williams, you mentioned Moro Ojomo, right? Thomas Booker, Zach Bond. Like these are guys that can all do unique stuff in this defense. And it just feels like we're on the verge of seeing something really good. And it could happen in Cincinnati, right? It could happen against the Jaguars even, whatever case may be. But this defense could be the reason why Philadelphia is going against Washington on that Thursday night football game, fighting for the number one seed in the NFCs, right? Like this defense is keeping them alive and doing everything that nobody's expecting them to do. Like Jalen Hurts, if you guys noticed, and every interview after the game for the last 2 weeks, he says to the person, like the reporter, you didn't ask me about the defense. Like it's for a reason. Like this defense is on the verge of something special, and we're seeing them grow. It's a lot of young guys that we didn't have a lot of patience for because of the Super Bowl run, right? We wanted to see this team go back there because we know the talent is there. But we do have to have a little patience because we got a new coordinator on offense, right? We got a new coordinator on defense. We have new cornerbacks. I mean, Quinion Mitchell, the guy is freaking phenomenal. But Cooper DeJean has to take some time to come along. Sidney Brown is finally healthy, and he could be a more short tackler than we've seen out of CJ And they could also utilize Sidney Brown, CJ and Cooper DeJean in different ways now in a defense. And then now you've discovered the fact that, hey, Thomas Booker's decently good. He could come in to spell Jalen Carter once in the blue. Jalix Hunt, we saw him. He could actually spell, a Josh Sweat or Brandon Graham, whatever the case may be. Bryce Huff, that nobody's talking about, is also coming along, and he had his best game of the season against the Giants. Like this team they're brewing something, and it's not at the same wavelength that we want them to be on, but they're brewing something that could actually turn into like a late season run where we see this team, maybe a wild card team, or maybe they win the NFC East, whatever case may be, but they can actually do some damage as time goes forward. And it sucks, right? Because our expectations for them are high. The standard is pretty damn high. Jalen Hurts had the best Super Bowl of a quarterback in God knows how long. We expect to see that, week in, week out. But the reality is this team needs to grow again. Sorry for the
You
little
mentioned
rant.
Jordan Davis. I just want to pose a question to you guys real quick, and to the chat as well. Is there any part of you, and I firmly understand why Jordan Davis was not in that game, throughout into the second half. As you mentioned, he's a run defender. The Giants stopped running because they couldn't run and they had to play catch up. Is there any part of you that wanted to see Jordan Davis in there trying to effectively just to get live snaps in a pass rushing situations, and whether trying just to establish confidence in himself as a pass rusher, knowing how the situation was against New York or something similar to that? Is there any part of you that kind of wished that Jordan Davis played a little bit more and had that opportunity to kind of build that confidence?
Is it bad if I say I expected it to be like that? Like, you would think this is the get right game, right? I don't know, Morgan, how do you feel about it?
I think that if the defense as a whole is playing more consistent football, then you experiment a bit. I think that in that case, like game script and that, honestly, like something that I was going to bring up too is just like how much the game script determines how well this defense plays, right? Like, and so I think that that's one of those things, right, where your defense is kind of clicking. Guys are doing what they're supposed to in their roles. We talked about how many guys got an opportunity to shine in their small roles. Like, I don't think that in a game like that, as good as like I think personally, absolutely, you want to see more from Jordan Davis. Why not give him opportunities? But also the balance of giving guys that haven't got the opportunity yet, a little bit of opportunity, kind of brandish their swords, shake a little rust off. Because then, like Brian said, if you get that rotation going, you might be in a better position. So I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But absolutely, in general, you need to get Jordan Davis going. He's one of those guys that if you can add him to the mix as a surefire playmaker, which they just haven't seen yet, this D-line is really scary. But I think it's kind of one of those situations where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because if it doesn't show a pass rush, now you're just going to have teams, taking advantage of him when he's on the field, right?
Is anybody concerned that the Eagles used a first-round pick on a guy like Jordan Davis and he's not coming along as quickly as many expected him to, or to be the monster that many expected him to be?
I think it's an underratedly tough position. I don't know if I could go back in the last couple of years and pick out a perfect example or anything like that. Like, there's a lot of defensive tackles that just start and they're monstrosities, right? We're used to like the Aaron Donalds that just start being a problem right away, right? Like that's when that becomes the definition of or the icon, the king of that position group. You compare everything to him, but I do think it's an underratedly tough position. He's again been asked to do a lot of different things with the defenses changing. So I think it's just going to take time. I think the most important thing right now is for him to be in shape, right? And that hasn't been a guarantee. So once he gets that in order and he's able to stay out there for more than 20 snaps a game, then you can start learning, because you need game snaps. But if you can't be in for them, if you're out of shape, you're not learning, right? Take him out of the field, take him off the field, give someone else an opportunity. So hopefully it's just one of those cases where he's going to take 3 or 4 years. Because the talent's there. There's no denying. There's no denying that the Eagles should have picked him where they did in that draft. Right now, 5 years from now, maybe that was a mistake, but I'm not ready to give up on him yet.
Yeah, listen. You look at how the player that he kind of always was meant to be. I mean, you're looking at a nose tackle. If you look at a guy like Jordan Davis, and he hasn't really been utilized like that during the early portions of his career. And you've been attempting kind of develop him into like a more modern version of a defensive tackle, right? Something that is a bit more versatile, a bit more flexible. And to Morgan's point, that's extremely difficult. Not only is playing the position difficult, but to try and expand, your game effectively and not just be a run stuffer, but also add pass rushing qualities. I mean, there's so much that goes into into pass rushing from a technique perspective. You have to retrain your body from an athletic standpoint. There's different muscles that you need to work out in those cases. Like, there's so much that goes into the difference between being a run stuffer and a pass rusher and effectively combining both of those skills. Let's not forget the fact that Jordan Davis is still young, right? So there's still time for him to develop. It's not happened overnight. It's obviously happened, longer than anyone would have anticipated, would have want. But we've seen guys like this develop, and I hate to, he's drawn already so many parallels to Brandon Graham. But legitimately, we've seen this happen before where some guys take longer to develop, and sometimes you pass on the safety that everybody wants, and the safety turns out pretty good, and the defensive player that you got, the defensive lineman, turns out pretty good if you just give him enough time. So, for me, I'm not in a rush to move on from him. I think that's part of the reason why the performance of this youth encourages me so much. And I do think, especially when you just consider his talent from a run stuffing, position, he's been a quality run stuffer for Philadelphia this year, right? There's been issues with the team setting the edge, but other than that, I think that he's performed his job rather well. So it's not as if he's completely failing on the field, right? He's just not developing in the additional area we all wanted and even expected him to. So, obviously we've all heard the reports about him managing his weight and this and that. I'm not going to comment specifically on that. What I will say is it's going to take 110% commitment from Jordan Davis to get where we want him to be, where he should want himself to be, and where the Eagles staff certainly wants him to be.
That's fair. So we're getting close to the hour mark. Again, it was against the Giants, right? But looking at it from a positive perspective, what can you guys take away from this win or this winning streak that they're currently on and say, hey, like, okay, they're onto something here. They're getting their shit together pretty much.
I mean, what stood out for me is just how incredible some of the players on this team are. You talked about Quinyon Mitchell, like that dude is unreal, and he's going to be maybe one of the best corners in the league in due time. Like, it's just only a matter of time before he's in that conversation. There have been a couple of plays where he's just like, gets his fingertip on the ball, or CJ Gardner-Johnson steals a pick from him, right? There's just been so many plays that he almost has, and you're just going to see him make those plays. He's just going to start happening where it kind of just clicks. It takes time to adjust to the speed of the game, and he adjusted pretty well. Like, he's still making plays up there, don't get me wrong, but some of those tipped balls and PBUs are going to turn into interceptions, and all of a sudden you're talking about an entirely different season for the Eagles, right? Like, you get some of those turnovers, those are game winners, those are game changers. So he's going to be one of those guys that just changes games for you. You talk about Josh Sweat, he's been pretty unbelievable overall this season. Again, a guy who, I don't think anyone's considering him to be as good as he is outside of Philly. Like, I feel like he's super underrated. Those are the kind of guys that give you a chance in the playoffs because you're able to just have so many talented players get into the rotation, making plays, and you don't have to, have a number one defensive end that you pay millions and millions of dollars that handcuff you at other positions. So that's one of those guys. You need those guys if you're going to make a run. And then talking about offense, like, listen, we saw him when he's playing for the Giants, but watching Saquon Barkley is unbelievable. I don't know if I'm ever going to see a better running back to wear an Eagles jersey. Like, again, is he going to set records? Who knows? Is he going to be remembered as one of the greatest Eagles of all time? Who knows? But right now, man, it is a pleasure to watch him play. He does things that are freaky. It's insane. And so, again, we just talk about the Eagles getting out of their own way. Talk about another player, A.J. Brown. Like, just throw it up to him. Get out of your own way. Toss it up. Jalen Hurts has got a beautiful long ball. You don't have to read anything. You get one-on-one coverage. You throw it up there, right? And so there's so much positive for the Eagles. Clearly, there's still stuff being left out there. But if the Eagles just kind of stop stepping on their own feet, stop tripping up the stairs, like, they're on their way up. You just got to kind of, take it one step at a time. And eventually this team is just going to be too good for their own blunders, I think. Like, it's just going to click. Now, that being said, there's a lot of good teams in the NFL this year. I think that's one of the most shocking. There's a lot of really good teams that probably shouldn't be as good as they are. You'll see them kind of fade off, but there's a lot of teams that are legit contenders, legit teams. So it's going to be a tough road. But I think there's a lot of positive to build off for the Eagles, and they kind of stopped shooting themselves in the foot. Like you said, Brian, I don't know if it's a turnaround game, but there's definitely something now that you can kind of feel confident about for sure.
Yeah, I think building that confidence is pretty key. Just going back to the Eagles' recent winning, that they won last week. That's 2 in a row. If they win next week, that's called a winning streak. And Philadelphia fans, that has happened before. So, I think that we're in that kind of building confidence period where you're going to see this team get more and more comfortable with themselves, with each other, and hopefully they continue to build on this success, right? So whether or not they win against Cincinnati this upcoming Sunday, which I think will be a challenging game, it's about keeping the right mental framework, right? So one loss does not mean that you have to revert back to how it was earlier in the season, right? And conversely, if they do win in Cincinnati, 3 wins in a row does not mean that you have to be satisfied with your performance and kind of rest on your laurels at that point. So for me, it's just about keeping that mentality of evolving, of adapting, keep that wheel churning. If you're Nick Sirianni and if you're Jalen Hurts, if you're Kellen Moore, and keep finding ways to get better each and every week. Not just win the games, but win the games and get better each and every week, because you're going to need that. As Morgan said, this NFL league it's tough this year. I mean, you look at surprise teams like the Minnesota Vikings, who was expecting that. The Detroit Lions obviously are an incredibly tough team. I mean, really, the whole NFC North is shockingly tough. The Rams are starting to get healthy. The Seahawks are better than expected. Kenneth Walker's been explosive and rather healthy over the past few weeks since returning from injury. And, you can go on and on. I get it. There's a lot of injuries racking up. Teams like New Orleans, teams like Tampa Bay. There's still a lot of difficult teams that you have to get through just in the NFC. That's not even talking about some of the explosive AFC teams that you could see this year if you do reach the Super Bowl, which is obviously the end goal of this team. So I think this is a good stepping stone in terms of confidence. I would like to continue to see them ascend that staircase of confidence. But I would say right now I feel hopeful, but there's still work to be done.
So one thing I can really take away from the last 2 wins is Vic Fangio seems to be getting creative outside of his own scheme, and I like that. I like the fact that he's actually throwing things into a scheme that that benefit the players. I'll never forget, when reading and about Brian Dawkins, is they remapped the defense completely around him. They built it around him, right? And we say that all the time, like coordinators should build around the strengths of their players, and it seems like Fangio's starting to learn that as the season goes along, where he's putting guys in position to succeed. So I'm curious to see how they look against Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, a struggling offense that can literally just turn up at any point in this season. One thing, before we wrap up the show is Jay Fitz has a question in the chat. He said, with the D-line coming along as it has these last 2 games, would you still press the button on the defensive end trade? There's only one D I want in the league.
He's not coming, dude.
I want him.
He's not coming.
Give me Myles Garrett, damn it. It won't happen, but I just feel like there's not. I think we explored this early in the season, Zach. There's not too many options out there that they can really.
The thing I will say is that this is why it doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. Right? You can talk about baseball, you can talk about football, you can talk about hockey or basketball. This is why this part of the year I enjoy a good bit more when you start talking about the rumor mill. The kind of trade talks there, is that you start getting a better picture of what some of these teams look like, right? The Cleveland Browns were not expected to look as bad as they are. Granted, they were expected to look pretty bad because Deshaun Watson was their quarterback. They still had questionable play at the wide receiver spot outside of Amari Cooper. And even he was questionable this year. But even still, now you're getting a better picture, of these teams. I don't think the Jets necessarily are going to sell off, even though they should at 2-5, and they're kind of a mess of an organization. But you look at teams like the Patriots, you look at teams like the Raiders, the Browns, the Titans. I mean, these are teams that, for the most part, have pretty much already given up, right? And we've already seen several trades this year so far. And, I think you can look at several of these teams. If Jacksonville had lost to the Patriots, I would include them in that list. And we love Dougie P, and I don't want him to lose his job. but I was kind of hoping they would lose, and a guy like Josh Allen becomes available, or one of those other pieces, because I think there are some pieces in that defense in Jacksonville. So there's potentially some guys that you can look at here and there across the league. I don't think there's necessarily an option to get any kind of home run hitters, but is there a guy that you can get who can reasonably improve this pass rush this season? I do think that there's guys out there who can do that. And there's even one in Cleveland, I think, who can be a part of that for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it makes me like I'm of two minds, because I think that a good pass rusher just takes this defense over the top, and it would really make it a difference when you can rotate all those guys in late in the season and then going into playoffs. Like, that's just such a hard thing to plan for as an offensive coordinator. You just don't get a break. But that being said, it's a weird situation the Eagles are in, because you're in a compete now, right? So what are you trading away? It's probably picks, right? But then you're also in a situation where this team for the next 5 years could be set up with a good draft, right? So it's kind of a weird mix of, like, what would you trade away? I think if you're going for a guy where it really takes the top off, you need one of those guys that are closer to the top tier. So you're definitely trading away some picks or some assets. And then you talk about the Eagles' health, right? Like, they don't really have depth at any position they can afford to lose, unfortunately. Maybe one of those young secondary pieces, but you're not sure about the future with Slay. You don't really want to lose pieces that you invested so heavily in. You stole one with Isaiah Rodgers, and you don't want to trade him away, I don't think. Again, you're not sure about that contract situation. So the Eagles are just in a tough position. What would they trade away before they've been able to kind of get some value out of
everything?
Offensive line? Well,
you traded all the way from Myles Garrett.
I mean, fair enough, right? If that's what you think takes the edge, and puts them over the top, then the price is whatever they ask. But yeah, they're just in a weird position. So I'd love to see them add someone, but I feel like if you could maybe get an off-ball linebacker, that might be a better case scenario. Who knows?
We got like Zadarius Smith coming at a cheaper price.
A lot of things can happen. Listen, Howie has done the incredible. He's also done us wrong at times. Like, I always forget this guy's name. Robert Quinn.
I know, the Bears guy. I know who you're talking about.
Robert Quinn. We were all hyped about that, because he was like, he's a good pass rusher, and they didn't play him at all. It could be good, it could be bad, but offensively, I don't think they need to add a piece, obviously. So you guys can all just kill those Cooper Kupp rumors that are going along for some weird reason. They traded for John Dotson, and they'll find a way to use him at some point. But defensively, like, you get that guy that puts the defense over the top, and we're talking about a team that could really turn the season at some point very soon. But yeah, exactly what Anthony's saying. His record defensive in-season trades have not been good. Have not been the greatest. Jannard Avery, I forgot about him. They stashed him for quite some time, right? If I'm not mistaken.
He was the future for like 3 different positions for a bit there.
He was supposed to be the ultimate weapon. Yeah. Oh man, but yeah. Other than that, we appreciate you guys coming out and joining us tonight. We will be back Saturday morning to preview the Eagles-Bengals matchup, which has been moved from the 4 p.m. slot to 1 p.m. if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then the week after, the Eagles-Jaguars game has been flexed out of Sunday Night Football to 4:05 p.m. I believe. So yeah, Eagles getting out of a lot of primetime spots because
they're
not primetime apparently. But yeah, other than that, we'll see you guys on Saturday. We appreciate you all for joining us tonight. And until then,
go Birds.
Yes, sir. Kind of miss Eric. Flip